Good evening, everyone, on this Thursday, as we remember Kaylee, Madison, Susanna, and Ethan. So grateful that you're here with us. And we are grateful for our mods, Teresa M., Maui Girl, Miss Sophia, and Laura.
And Mimi J2. Mm-hmm. Yep. And Maui Girl, I don't want to forget her. Did you already say that? I apologize if you already did.
And I said Maui Girl, but we'll say Maui Girl 1,000 times.
She's so nice. Let's say her twice.
Give it a couple of minutes for folks to get in here. We've got a lot to talk about tonight.
We sure do. There's so much, but there's a lot of true crime news, and there's a lot of news around the upcoming Bryan Kohberger trial, which is obviously what we're talking about tonight.
Hopefully you've had a great week so far, that you've enjoyed some of the content that we've put up. We've got another great piece coming about Emily Pike on Sunday night. Don't miss that. We're going to have Dr. Gary Bricotto, who was supposed to be here tonight, but he got tied up at work. But we're going to have him and Dr. Ann Burgess from the Behavior Science Unit on Sunday. So you're not going to want to miss that. We're going to do a personality profile of the type of individual that would have fallen into place in relationship to Emily Pike. Okay.
That's going to be really fascinating, because I know that Dr. Gary and Dr. Ann have done a lot of research along those lines. So it's going to be really interesting to hear what they have to say.
Yeah, definitely. Okay, so a couple of predictions that have been going on in relationship to our channel. You know, a couple of years ago when we started covering this, one of the things you would have heard if you would have been here, but you're here tonight, you would have heard this.
There's a tremendous amount of pornography on his computer. And that he was the kind of guy that liked to brush up against women.
So when was that, Karen?
And I'll bet you there's a tremendous amount of pornography on his computer. And that he was the kind of guy that liked to brush up against women.
So that was 2 years ago, after his arrest and after the probable cause affidavit was released, and when we started learning more about the accused killer of the 4 Idaho college students.
Yeah. And also another thing that you heard here first, when we assembled a team to kind of go over this, the killer's personality profile. Dr. Bricado absolutely nailed his personality type. And what we are also in agreement, we've not seen the totality of the evidence yet, but the fact that the defense is trying to keep out all of the click data and any type of search information in relationship to BK, we are all of the same opinion that it's going to be related somehow to some serious, inappropriate material like essay material, that kind of stuff. And just like I said a couple of years ago, it'll probably be related to pornography. It's not going to surprise us, let's say that. So I think that's what the defense is also fighting, on top of some of the information in relationship to some of the searches. And I've been curious from day one, and Karen, what do you think about the fact that they took his TV? Remember when they took his TV?
I sure do. It's going to be really interesting to see what they got off of that.
Yeah.
Or
Well, actually, they didn't get it. Remember, the defense took it.
No, that's what I meant. So the defense has it, and the defense knows. And so I wonder, is any of that going to come out during the trial, or are they going to clamp down on whatever was on there? And the prosecution has the Fire Stick and the computer and that information. And boy, they probably have a ton of stuff just on that alone. But it really would be curious. I'd be curious to see what was on that TV.
Yeah, I am waiting with bated breath to see what's been going on with that. Now, and the only way the prosecution would have gotten it is through those search warrants up into the cloud, if any of that information was stored up in the cloud. So again, I'm going to go with this prediction.
There's a tremendous amount of pornography on his computer.
And this is when we were in the Airstream, and I love Buddy sleeping in the back there. And he's now at the bottom of my feet here, but I don't know why. I just feel that even back then, when this first happened, that this was all going to be interesting. And so with that in mind, tonight, we're going to talk about some obsessions and some ideas that we have presented here on this channel that are now coming to pass. We were the first ones to talk about, the documents in relationship to the knife. When the state took the knife now on Amazon and they've made it public now. We were the first ones to talk about the Amazon inventory search numbers from the first search warrants, which were, by the way, within 13 or 14 days after the homicides. That information was presented, and now it's coming to pass. And we talked about that information almost a year and a half ago, that these numbers here at the bottom, these ASIN numbers, if you put them into Amazon, you see this inventory control number and you get this item. And you heard that first here. We're glad that people are finally catching up and are going, oh my gosh, he did buy the knife or tried to buy the knife. And if we go back, though, to when the search warrant was returned, you'll see it was November 26, 2022. We talked about that within a couple of days, 4 or 5 days after that. Actually, it was December 8th, so it had to be after December 8th when it returned. And that's when we first put that information out there. So where we're going tonight, we're going to talk about something that we have discussed here. And we've discussed it at length. And Dr. Baccato was the first one to ask our group at the Cold Case Foundation, hey, has anybody been thinking about who his mentors were? And a couple of names have come up, but Ted Bundy still comes up to the top in our professional opinion. We have talked about this, for quite some time. A lot of people, just like the knife, when I first said, hey, we need to be looking at this, when we talked about some of the other personality traits, so far, we've been doing pretty good. Not, we don't have all the information. However, one of the things, that was brought up, is this a Dennis Rader type? The answer, in our opinion, is no. He doesn't even fit the frame of mind of Dennis Rader, because Rader had obviously, matured enough to where he was a different breed of his own. Okay. However, Bryan Kohberger, we're starting to learn now through his schoolwork and his professional presentations when he was a PhD student, that he has information about crime scenes. He was a PhD student in criminology with a minor in, some digital footprint information. But we all came to the conclusion, and it was kind of driven by, Gary with this thought process that said, what about Bundy? Okay. So we're going to show you tonight another reason why we think, what about Bundy? And here it is.
Chris, that is so chilling. First of all, the picture of his selfie that was taken, prosecutor said that picture on the left of BK was taken around 10:30 in the morning after the killings. And of course, the picture on the right is Ted Bundy in the courtroom, mugging for probably the media, a camera.
Yeah, so it is not going to surprise us. Gary sent me this picture about 4 or 5 days ago, and I went, oh, snap. I think we're into it. And he said, we're into it. There's going to be something somewhere. And when we looked at this, now, one of the other things, I don't know if you guys noticed, but I've seen this look on people, not this particular, thumbs up look, but doesn't he just look like all human experience and life and the soul of the human being? I have been across people that have committed murder many, many times. And when you look at somebody's eyes, they're dead. I don't know about you, but he is pale. It's almost as if when I first saw that, selfie that he took, that there's nothing there anymore. Nobody's home. He's literally sold his soul to the devil.
Allegedly.
Allegedly. That's why I love her.
That's why I'm here.
One of many 10,000 reasons. But his humanity is gone. And when we look at Ted Bundy, the opposite, giving a thumbs up at this picture was taken as he was leaving court. And then we look at this guy, and he's given a thumbs up at 10:30 in the morning, which would have been post-homicide. allegedly. And he's doing it around the shower. And now we try to think through, okay, what's this guy thinking? And then we discover, no wonder the defense has been working so hard that, oh, by the way, did I tell you he wrote a whole final scenario on a crime scene where the victim in that crime scene scenario was a female. And if you also look on this picture a little bit closer, the discoloration on the top of his hand, about 2 inches down from the bottom, the base of his thumb, it looks like a discoloration there. My question was, is that bruising? Is that some type of hematoma? And if so, it would be consistent with 4 to 6 hours of it starting to surface and develop. Was this as a result of something that he had done, or is that just a discoloration in the picture? I don't know. But when I looked at it closer, it's consistent, with me looking at it through a picture. It looks more on the bruising side than it does on a discoloration side. And when you think about, who are his mentors in his study and his thought process, and then you see this thumbs up picture, and then you see that Ted Bundy did the exact kind of gesture to the public. This is a message that he is sending here.
Chris, the other thing that's interesting is, remember the list of items taken from his Pullman, Washington apartment at Washington State University? Do you remember it? There was a book, and it was page 118 was highlighted. I just can't help but think, what book was that? Was it, something that had to do with?
We kind of braced Gary that it could be his.
That would be super interesting as well. I wonder if it's going to come out during trial, because certainly it's a piece of evidence that prosecutors felt was highly interesting. And so, again, it goes back to what we're talking about, this guy's mentors or who we looked up to, what have you. Although obviously his, this crime and Bundy's crimes were quite different, obviously.
Yeah, but was he a serial killer in the making? And had he, remember Bundy's last crime was the sorority. Well, it was the 12-year-old, but just before that, it was the sorority girls.
Yes, and remember, we had one of those surviving victims of him on our show to talk about that.
Yes, we did.
I think we'll put the link to that video in the description below later. Fascinating, and my goodness, just this woman must have had. She had an angel over her to be able to survive that. Her story was incredible.
Yeah, she sure did. And let's say he was obsessed and had a fixation on obviously serial killers. Remember, he did this survey on, what it felt like to, commit major, crimes. And he was asking felons as part of his, college work, what was that all about? Right. And as Gary pointed out a while back, he says, hey, remember early on when he was arrested, what's one of the first things they did? And they hired a guy to do a survey of the community and jurors. Remember? And that was part of the basis to move the trial, that Ann Taylor, depended on that. And Gary's feeling was, and I can't disagree with him, that was being driven behind the scenes by BK. And of course, that's just a theory, but it was pretty interesting that this photograph shows up now as a selfie, and yet that situation on the other side, Ted Bundy, it's just eerie when you look at him. And so you have to say to yourself, okay, well, was this guy influenced? And remember Bundy's last hit, one of them was the sorority and all girls. And his first hit is all girls, with my opinion still that Ethan was a curveball. I'm still of the opinion that Maddie was an obsession with him as a first target, but all of those girls were the targets of him. And by the time Ethan was done with him, and by the time he was done with Ethan, he was exhausted. And that is why Dylan and Bethany, in my opinion, are still alive. I do believe he would have slaughtered that whole house. That's just my opinion. We'll never know because they are alive, thank the Lord. So that said, there's also additional information going around about, arguments in relationship to the house. Again, Karen, bring us up to speed on the house.
So there is a discussion going on back and forth within this motion. And this is, you can see if you scroll up more, Chris, this is a 9-page document. And by the way, this is part of the huge document dumps that have been going on. Thank goodness, because it's giving us a huge amount of insight into this case as we get closer to the trial. But what I found really interesting about this is there's discussion between the defense attorney, Ann Taylor, and the prosecutor, Bill Thompson, about presenting a 3D model of the house to the jury for discussion purposes when they reference things in the house. And what's interesting about this, if you keep scrolling up, Chris, at the bottom of these in the last few pages, you can see the emails back and forth, again, between the prosecutor and Ann Taylor, defense attorney. And all I can think about when I'm reading this is, if you had left the house and the crime scene, this wouldn't even be an issue. You probably wouldn't, you would have your photographs, of course, but there wouldn't have to have been a 3D model created of the home you destroyed before the trial. So I find it fascinating that both sides are now having discussions about this 3D model, and can they use it? How are they going to use it? It's not an actual scale model, is what they say. And of course, it's another point for the defense to argue with the prosecution about. Why not? Add it to the list.
Yeah, and I think all of us, right, guys and gals, all of us felt that taking that house down was like a huge mistake. And now the defense has come back and said, well, the 3D model, first you said it was going to be to scale, now it's not to scale. And so now they're arguing about, what's to scale, what's not to scale. How big is this model going to be that, the jurors are going to be seeing. Now, the good news is, the fact that they at least are going to try to put a model on. It'll never, ever replace the real thing. I think we all know that. Okay. But at the same time, we all had a sense that don't take the house down, please. And I think who's at fault here, being honest in this whole situation with just the facts as they are, is the University of Idaho. They are the ones that were driving, take this house down. And
Right. I would argue that if we had a confident, highly experienced prosecution, they would have never allowed this. Chris, you've worked well over 300 murders in your time. You worked in San Diego County, one of the large metropolitan areas in this country, mass volume. You worked with the district attorney's office so closely for years and years. Would the prosecutors that you worked with, let's say this case hypothetically, just for our discussion's sake, had happened not in Idaho but in Southern California, would the prosecution have been so quick to say, yeah, okay, cave to the university and take down the crime scene before the trial?
no, they would not have. Somebody was at the other day. I just testified in a trial 2 days ago, as you know, Bonnie. And I was on the stand, and the prosecutor asked me, the prosecutor asked me, about my background, et cetera. And see, that's the other thing, people don't know that I still am actively involved in crimes. In criminal court. I go to court, I still put my hand up, I tell the truth. Okay? That's just how I am and what I do. And I have, for lack of a better term, I bring the cred to the courtroom on my side. And the question was, how many murders have you worked, and yada yada. Okay? And I thought to myself once again, the importance of how every minutia piece of evidence is a piece of the truth. And it's got to be good, and it's going to be bad. That's what the truth is sometimes. The truth hurts. And the reason it hurts is because it's the truth. And, we all, as Chase Hughes says, we all wear a mask. Okay. Every one of us has some type of vulnerability or pain or suffering that we've each experienced, and our behavior reflects that.
So let me just make a finer point to what I just said.
Okay.
As I see there's a couple of questions. So I don't mean to imply that the Latah County prosecutor hasn't prosecuted cases. That's not what I meant. And I should have been a little more clear. There is a very fine difference between prosecuting run-of-the-mill standard cases and a complex multiple victim homicide that has immediately had national and international spotlight on it. These cases are under the microscope, and until you've worked a case like that, you don't have the experience of knowing what it's like to work a case like that. I'm not blaming them, but I'm making the point here that if you had a prosecutor who had actually had one of these in their past, maybe a multiple victim, maybe just one victim of something similar, a huge international story, and something so that rocked the whole community, the whole nation. It's different than just prosecuting the regular cases. So that I don't want to spend too much time on this. We have so much to get to, but that's what I'm saying, because of course the defense was delighted that the crime scene went away. But if the prosecution held on to it, I'm just saying there may be less to argue about ahead of the trial. Chris,
Yep.
What do you got for us?
Well, and now we just saw information where he purchased an item at Dick's Sporting Goods, and it was a face covering. And one of the reasons he bought this, according to the response from the defense was, they go camping. They buy bear spray, they buy all these other things. And this just happened to be an item that he, pulled off of the rack long before the homicides. And this is the drawing that Dylan made for the police that showed the type of face covering the perpetrator was wearing.
Well, it's a ski mask, and it's called a balaclava. Say that 10 times.
I can't say that one time.
I know. I'll say it. It's a balaclava. Let's just call it a ski mask. And only this part of the eyes are seen. Thus, that's where we get with Dylan Morton's description of seeing the bushy eyebrows.
Yeah.
Which, by the way, I don't want to go too far off if we want to talk about this, but the defense is still trying to get the words bushy eyebrows banned from the trial by the prosecution. And they basically are trying to discredit Dylan Mortensen's testimony and what she gave, her statements to police. I don't know if it's going to fly with the jury. What do you think, Chris?
Well, no, it's not. Again, we've talked about these two victims because they are victims. Dylan and Bethany were there. They were in the house. Now, again, their lives were spared because, again, we don't know what his thought process was as to why he walked past them. But we definitely know what their frame of mind was when we listened to the 911 call. They in one of the 911 calls when we listen to Dylan, for an example, and we did a whole thing on this recently. And if you need to go back and listen to that, please do that. But the frame of mind of those girls that morning was pure fear. And
sheer terror.
At 4:00 in the morning. Okay. Now, we also have to correlate some of the dynamics that are taking place. Let's use Xana for an example. Xana is up at 4 a.m. getting a DoorDash delivery. Okay. Is it possible that, remember, the first floor is where that DoorDash comes, and then in the back door, either the back door or the first floor? Is it possible that Kohberger was already in the house and on the third floor, and Xana's moving around? Is it possible? Because, remember that DoorDash bag is found in there's a photograph of that DoorDash bag. So, is it possible? I would submit to you, yes, it's possible. And this is why Dylan would say Xana was wearing all black. Okay. Maybe, remember, Dylan is drunk. Bethany's intoxicated. We know that Maddie and Kaylee were intoxicated. And we also know that Ethan and Xana were probably intoxicated. They're out having a party that night, i.e., they're out celebrating life with their friends at, the corner bar and all of that stuff. And, they're walking by talking about, remember, I told Jack everything. It's caught on video as they're walking back towards the grub truck. And these are one of the reasons they want to suppress some of that evidence, the defense, which there are motions to do that, is because they don't want anybody to think that these kids could have been inebriated and sleeping. Because, who in the world comes in when you know, somebody sleeping in their bed. Who would do that? You know, what kind of animal would attack young girls, inebriated, sleeping in their own home and in their beds? Who would do that? And of course, the defense doesn't want you to know that, right? The defense doesn't want you to have that information. You know, if you had that information, then of course, you know, that could be a problem. It could be a problem. So that, and then when you add on some of the information that he has, you know, pre-incident behavior. Let's go with the type of clothing that he buys. Let's go with his shopping history. Let's chase down, you know, his school history. And this is one of his final papers that he submitted in May of 2020 as part of his class. And what is CJ 361, Karen?
Well, let's set this up. This is a college paper that Bryan Kohberger wrote as a student at DeSalle University. It's from May 5th, 2020, and the class is Forensic Investigation. Now, before we get into this, and by the way, the prosecution is presenting this particular page. It's a 12-page paper he wrote as a college student, as a criminal justice student. They are presenting this as evidence, which I think is brilliant. Now, what we have to remember is this, when we're going to go through this, because I think there's a lot of gems in here. We want to present this to you guys, see what jumps out at you. But this particular paper that they released through a motion a couple days ago, we have to take this together with the study. Do you remember the study that Bryan Kohberger did as still a student at DeSalle University, where he surveyed criminals to, quote, understand how emotions and psychological traits influence decision-making when committing a crime, end quote. So first we have the fact that, well, actually this came first, if we're going to keep it in chronological order, because this is from 2020. So we have him writing a 12-page paper that we're going to go through about crime scene. And oh, by the way, in this particular paper, he decides a woman, age 35 years old, dies by being stabbed to death in his college paper. Okay. Now, and then we know at the end of in the spring of 2022, around that time, when he was still a student, he did the study where he was basically soliciting criminals to find out how they felt at committing the crime before, during, and after. So we have to take both of these together, as the jury is going to, and weigh them and think about them and see what it feels like and what your common sense is being told. Because we know the defense is going to probably do a masterful job at telling you your lying eyes, aren't seeing what they're seeing. So anyway, this 12-page paper describes how he would properly process a crime scene if he were a member of law enforcement. So that's the premise. He discusses a specific case, as I mentioned, involving a 35-year-old woman who was stabbed to death in a trailer park. And then this said it was unclear if it was real or fictional. I'm going to give you my opinion. My opinion is this was fictional according to a fantasy of his. Again, my opinion only, okay? But how and why does he come up with this? And by the way, as a writer, as I am, it almost strikes me as if he's laying out some kind of fictional murder mystery account, but he's not. He's trying to walk through a crime scene at first person and what he would do, which, again, extremely creepy and chilling, obviously knowing what we now know. Chris, do you want to read through this? Read and then scroll up so people can follow along?
Well, I mean, there's just so much here. I think if we just kind of scroll as we're going along here, what I'm looking for is behavioral correlation statements.
Sure. Okay, so let's go to page 2.
Okay, I'm on page 2.
Okay, so go midway down where it says equipment I will have on hand for the investigation. Right
Okay.
there. This jumped out at me. You tell me what you think. It says to be prepared for crime scene investigation, quote, I must ensure I have a crime toolkit containing the following. Okay.
And
Go ahead.
what people are thinking now, and what we would think now, is based on some of the items that he purchased online. We would call that a kill kit.
Exactly.
Okay, so go ahead.
Okay. Well, there's a few questions. So if you're just joining us, I want to just be clear. So this is a 12-page paper that Bryan Kohberger wrote in college, and the assignment was how he would properly process a crime scene if he were a member of law enforcement. Okay, so that's kind of the premise here. Okay, also on page 2, he's got this list that he gives. What jumped out at me was halfway down where it says, wait, scroll up. Gloves to protect the scene from contamination. This will enable that I avoid leaving my latent fingerprints.
That's first person.
First person. Now, again, he wrote this in 2020, okay? But knowing what we know about gloves.
Okay, but think about this.
Mm-hmm.
He inserted himself into the crime scene.
In this assignment.
In this
paper.
Right.
Agreed.
So go ahead.
Scroll down to the bottom where it says protective clothing. Boot covers, eyewear, fiber-free overalls, face masks, hairnets, gowns, anything that will prevent me from contaminating the scene with things I bring in with me.
Again, he's inserting himself first person into an event. And I recognize the fact that, the assignment is to write about crime scenes. Okay, we get that. Okay. But he's asked, how would you take the crime scene, or what would you do in a crime scene? And then in some of these things, he's not using, the word I. Anytime you see the word I, okay, that means, it's personal in nature. And so it's connecting to the brain in relationship to either potentially an experience or a fantasy. Okay. So, and in this case, obviously he's never had that experience. He's never had an experience to where he processed a crime scene. Now you can go to CrimeCon and process all the crime scenes you want. Okay. But he's never been in with a 35-year-old woman, who I find is a very interesting victim type. Okay. Why a woman? Why not a guy? A 35-year-old male who's been stabbed. But his choice of victimology here is a 35-year-old woman, and his weapon of choice is not a gun, it's not poison, it's not strangulation. More women are strangulated than they are stabbed, statistically. Okay. So the fact that he chooses a knife as a weapon, again, is this a fantasy process that's going on? Is that a possibility? You cannot take that off the table. And that's
100% agree.
That's why the prosecution's not only going to admit this to say, hey, this guy knew a lot about in his head how to process crime scenes, and that's why he's wearing gloves in Pennsylvania at 2:00 in the morning, taking his trash out to his neighbor's house. Okay. Juries are really smart when they see and hear stuff like this, common sense. Okay. They're not the type of individuals that say, well, you know what? We just saw Luigi shoot a guy in the back in New York City. You know, he didn't really do that. Okay. Those are deniers. Okay. And you can't talk sense to those types of people. It's like blowing out a light bulb. Okay? And in this case, or meaning in this situation, here is his mind. This is his mind. He's putting. Go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, go ahead. Sorry. Finish.
No, he's putting it on paper for us. Go ahead.
Exactly. And you can't help but ask the question, was all of this premeditated? That's a common sense question that we're going to leave out there. The jury's going to have to decide. But boy, this sure is interesting. Let's go to page 3, Chris. And let's see. Can you scroll to page? Okay. So midway down the page. So now we're at page.
Entering the home.
Yeah, exactly. Entering the home for crime scene documentation and initial photography, videography. Look at that one bullet point. It says, quote, I must ensure, let's see. Yeah, it's down there at the bottom. I must ensure that myself and my fellow crime scene personnel are wearing gloves and other protective equipment as to avoid contaminating the scene with latent fingerprints. Okay, so somebody could say, well, in the manual, this is how you process a crime scene. Now that we know this person, this author is accused of the crimes he is, I find this obsession with the latent fingerprints very interesting because it's throughout this college paper. Thoughts?
Well, he changes the trailer park to a home.
Ooh, good catch.
The first thought process is entering the home. Okay.
Trailer park. That's right. That's right.
There were 35 trailers in the trailer park. Okay. And now he has narrowed that down in his mind. These are little subtleties. Remember, it's the minutia details that we as investigators pick up on. And so as an example, if you were sitting in an interview with this guy, that's exactly what I would have asked him about. I would say something to the effect of, Bryan, you started this document by saying it was, a trailer park with 35 trailers. But here on page 3, you say, you're entering a home. What's going through your mind? Help me understand that. Okay. And because one thing about Bryan Kohberger that we're going to learn, he can't help himself about wanting to talk about the details of what's going on in this murder. What I mean by that, his head is spinning. His mind is going. And I can't tell you how many times I've sat across murderers similar to him that all they want to do is tell you that they did it right. They did it right. And look at this. Didn't he do it right? He gives us a thumbs up. It's all good, folks. Don't worry.
So, Chris, I'm wondering if the jury's going to wonder when they read through this and it's presented, does this idea on his paper of entering the home correlate at all to this crime that he is accused of?
Well, that's going to be a great question, right? In front of the jury. And it's going to be interesting to hear how this thing unfolds. But, that he's projected very clearly to the public now. And Ann Taylor, unfortunately, she's got a job ahead of her as well as the rest of the team And that's why they're trying to just destroy as much of this as they can in terms of keeping it out of the eyes of the jury. But here we also go, I must ensure my fellow crime scene personnel are wearing. So you notice he's in charge here in the document. He's like the head guy who knows more than anybody else on the scene. Okay? And so he writes this in the first person in relationship to he takes control of the entire scene. Whereas in reality, in an investigative team, there is no letter I in the word team. Everybody has an assignment, everybody has a competence, and everybody, does what they need to do. But here, this is an interesting point that he points out here where it says fibers can be left via the theory of exchange. And what's the theory of exchange? Whatever goes in stays. And whatever comes out with the suspect. Okay? So if a suspect brings something in, i.e., a vacuum cleaner, whatever, hypothetically, and what he takes out, the victim could have, under this theory of exchange, the victim could have their DNA, their information on that item leaving the crime scene, as well as the suspect can leave their information in the crime scene, i.e., a sheath underneath one of the victims. Okay. So he understands this principle because he mentions it here. Okay.
And I find it interesting, zooming out just momentarily, knowing his type of personality, that he's a know-it-all, is how he was described by the students when he was the teaching assistant, whose papers he graded very harshly. A know-it-all who's going into great minutia detail in this college 12-page paper, and yet a knife sheath was dropped at the crime scene with his DNA on the snap. So what a blow to the ego of somebody who writes a paper knowing all this great detail, and is so confident that shops it to a police department wanting to be an intern and wanting to teach them getting in their IT or getting involved in crime scene, to have such a blunder at the actual crime scene.
Well, and I think this is a good thought here. I'll say he's an amateur. You never take a sheath. I don't know. I think we're going to be surprised. We're going to be surprised. I think the trial's going to, kind of blow our socks off, where we're going to learn how that sheath got dropped. I'm not convinced that, again, we go into this concept of who's awake at that time. Well, we know Bethany is awake. We know Dylan is awake. We know that Xana is awake. We know that Ethan is awake. Okay. We know that Maddie and Kaylee are sound asleep in their rooms. I mean, just drunk, passed out. And so with all of these individuals being awake, does that cause, a kink in the plan? Because remember, again, I'm going to go back to this situation 2 years ago.
Tremendous amount of pornography on his computer.
I said that almost 2.5 years ago, or whenever it was.
Tell us why. Talk about the fantasy aspect of this type of personality that would lead you to believe, to make that statement.
Well, two things. One, my training and experience. And two, that you don't kill 4 people unless there's a fantasy. It's not like a spontaneous situation where you show up one day and decide, okay, today's the day I'm going to slaughter 4 innocent people in this house. Okay. No, there's a lot of thought process, a lot of malice of forethought, for lack of a better term there. And so you have to ask yourself, okay, what drives that? What drives that? And if we go back and we start looking at the history of, BK, allegedly, that will come out in trial. If we look at his history, as Dr. Bricado has said, even very much clearer than I will say, is he was this reject, for lack of a better term, among women. They would look at him like weird, the birthing hip statement. Remember that? You have good birthing hips. Okay. The books that he was reading, the lectures that he was attending, all of this was anti-woman. And there was this hatred to women inside of there. So when you take that thought process and you say, okay, well, where do you get the fuel for that type of hatred? Where is that fuel? Okay. And so then you have to say, well, in my experience, guys who have done stuff like this, and I interviewed one just a month ago in jail who shot a woman in the head. He just walked in there and she rejected him. She was sleeping and he walks in. She rejects him. Boom. He caps her. And I talked to him in the jail, and I asked him, I said, what are we going to find on your phones and in your computers and stuff? And lo and behold, it's like crazy stuff. Okay. Crazy stuff. Again, I'm going to say this 1,000 times.
And that he was the kind of guy that liked to brush up against women. And I'll bet you there's a tremendous amount of pornography on his computer.
And that's when we were in the Airstream. Okay. And we haven't been in the Airstream in almost 2 years. So that was when we were traveling the country. So it will not surprise me. It may surprise a lot of other people where they're going to go, oh my gosh, we've been defending this guy. Okay. When they open that can of worms, we're going to know why the house that had 5 girls in it was chosen. And that fantasy will play out because that's what he was doing. There's evidence now that he drove around the house multiple times, just as we said. And Karen, you and I have been at that home. The first thing, remember in the back when I said, that block is out of place. It does not, that cylinder, that it's just not, it doesn't look right. It doesn't fit. Why? Because it looked like it was being used as a bench.
Or a step.
Or
Chris
step.
is talking about a cinder block that was placed under one of the windows on, is that the first floor when you were looking at the house in the back? And we should, I don't think we have that photo, but.
Second floor, it's even with the second floor.
Yeah, if we don't, it's going to take a bit to call it up, but anyway, you can see clearly what he's talking about.
It's at Dylan's room. It's at Dylan's bedroom. And then if you are in a car and you're parked, remember, hon, we drove behind the house and we sat in the car. Whose room could we look right into? Maddie's room.
Maddie's, yeah.
Yeah. So think about that. And one of our thought processes early on was, oh my gosh, whoever did this is sitting here surveilling these kids.
The whole back of the house was a fishbowl. You could see it was very easy from the parking lot in the back. If you were on foot, you could walk through the woods. It wasn't that woodsy. It was more like landscaped area. And you could see right in to the kitchen. You could see right into like the whole house, the whole back of the house.
Yeah, it was chilling. It really was chilling. And, as you know, a lot of folks, I'm I'm on Nancy Grace's show a lot. And we talked about it at length where, oh my gosh, once you're there and you look in and you go, holy cow, whoever did this knew exactly what type of steps they wanted to take. And that's why this crime scene went from an organized crime scene, and we now have evidence of that, the preparation that took place up to and including the house, into the house. We have the clothing being selected. We have all of this search history. They're chasing the money, and that's why you have all these different banks, okay? And that's why in some of these most recent motions that the state has come up and says, well, we're not chasing, Ethan's bank account anymore because there was obviously no, and what they're doing is looking for patterns of life in the following the bank history. Okay? They wanted to see if any other, activity on any of their banks occurred post homicide, i.e., did the suspect get like one of their bank cards and then try to utilize it at some point? And in some of the last motions, the prosecution has come up and said, well, we're not seeing evidence of that, so we're not going to put that evidence on about Ethan's money, about Maddie's money, about Kaylee's money, about Xana's money. We're not seeing evidence of that. However, if during the trial that changes, then we reserve the right to produce an expert to discuss those types of things. And
well,
that's
Chris, if the money would, if robbery was any kind of motive tied in here, I think the money would have been an issue. Tell me if you disagree. But obviously that wasn't the motive for these crimes.
right. It's going to be an SA motive.
Exactly.
I'll fall out of this chair if it's not. Okay. So that thinking is because this is his thought process pre-incident. Remember, he's got this. He's got many other things that he's studying. He's studying serial killers. Dr. Mercado is not going to be surprised if his book was found in some of the evidence that they recovered. And if you think about this, just this snapshot for a moment, who does this at 10:30 in the morning after a mass murder has taken place? The kind of person that does that is the guy on the right. Is there going to be evidence that shows that he was studying and learning about what the guy on the right did? And if he's chosen that career path, for lack of a better term, okay, why not start where he ended again? Okay, why not start where Ted Bundy ended almost with the sorority? Why not start with a bunch of college girls? Okay, by the way, the same state or in Washington State University where Ted Bundy killed some of his victims, right? In Washington. Remember, they went to the Green River Killer. The BAU went to the Green River Killer and said, hey, help us understand the people that are doing some of the things that they were doing. And he told them, okay, well, that's what's going on with this guy, with BK. I'll guarantee it. He was studying how to become a serial killer, and he was on the road. He was an apprentice to become a serial killer. Had he not left the DNA, okay, he would have been another Ted Bundy. Go ahead.
It's interesting picking up on that idea of being a student and studying. Maybe the books, and this is just a thought, this is a discussion point, the books and other serial killers weren't enough. And that, speculating, why would he craft his own study? Why would he want to talk to recent criminals and feel them out and ask them these very specific questions? What did it feel like at the crime scene? What did you do as a lead up? How did you feel after? All those really odd, strange questions that he asked criminals. He was trying to get insight, trying to get into their minds and think like them, to say the least.
Yeah. So, and you're 100% right, Karen. I mean, you're 100% right, hon. And, you know, if to answer your question, Vet Girl, you know, again, I keep going back to that Maddie, yes, was a primary target. There's the reason, I think the only evidence we have for that right now that's available to the public, okay, is the fact that he starts at the third floor. Okay. He goes to the third floor. Again, I don't think it's going to surprise anybody from our team anyway, the Cold Case Foundation, that he hadn't also been into that house at some point. And he had a good layout, or at least he studied enough about that house to know exactly how he's going to do this. So if he
there were pictures online that he could have accessed through any of these real estate websites.
Absolutely.
To your point. Go ahead.
Yeah. And so if he had that knowledge, and let's think about that for a moment now when we do a comparative analysis to this document here that is, going to be admitted as a piece of evidence into the trial. This is, it's even got a number on it. Okay, right here, State's Exhibit S7. This is going to come in to trial. So this gives us an idea of how he thinks. Right? Go ahead.
Just a super quick thought, and I'm really curious what you guys think in chat. So along the lines of, if he gets to create the victim a woman, if there's hatred there for women, okay, a trailer park, let's be honest, people look down on trailer parks, okay? So doesn't that maybe speak to the superiority complex idea that this person has, right? I'm going to make the victim a woman and I'm going to put her in a trailer park, not an apartment, not in a small town, whatever, but a trailer park. I'm just saying.
Yeah, no, I mean, that's, and if we look at just this document, there's a generality to this document as well. Okay, I mean, being fair. Okay. Yeah, I mean, this is kind of like, some of it's like, okay, what is Google going to tell me? Okay, and you cut and paste it and you plug it in. Okay. But then there are specifics in here, like you are talking about. He shifts it. Look to what's the social economic process of looking through the lens of the suspect, and you just pointed a good one out. Okay, sometimes, remember, he comes from a very pretty good area. In his mind, is he looking, through that lens? Is he always looking over his glasses at women? And there is evidence that, yes, that's in fact what he does. Okay. And right up to the students that say, yeah, the guy was mean. Right up to the fact that he was released as a TA. Okay, because, he was treating people with disdain and, et cetera. And they saw him as being this, weirdo. Okay. Well, that's been his whole life. And, Gary and I have talked about it at length with Greg and Dr. Ann and others. These are people top in their field and had nailed, the thought process of how they would eventually find this guy. Okay. And lo and behold, now there are statements coming out where he says to the cops, hey, you guys want to have a cup of coffee together and we'll talk about this. Okay. Well, you see, again, that goes to what I was saying, what we were talking about earlier, is he can't control himself in that. He has to tell his story. I will think through this process where if the death penalty is taken off of the table, He can't wait to tell the story because it's being driven inside of him. He has to tell the story. And you know that Ann Taylor has heard behind the scenes, well, no, we're not going to do that. No, don't do that. And we got a glimpse of that early on with the jury survey. Okay. Now, this is an interesting place where he puts her, a deceased woman in the living room who should be photographed under unique or adequate lighting with a long view. From a long view, they call those overalls, right? Specific shots should be focused on the evidence of harm on her body and clothing. No, specific shots should not be focused on her injuries. Those specific shots are taken at the ME's office because you don't know what those injuries are. Okay. Whenever you hear somebody say, oh, that looks like a 45, or that looks like, this or that, I've had detectives say that, and I've looked at them and said, no, I don't think so. We don't know. Let's wait. Okay. Because the skin is elastic. Okay. And you can't tell the caliber of a gun that was utilized to go through the human skin, because the skin will expand and then it will shrink. And the only way you find that is if you find bullet fragments, and that's why they're looked for at the ME's office. The first thing they do is they, do a radiology picture of the body. And they you can see the fragments in the body. And that's where the ME goes. And he starts pulling them out and says, oh, look at this. It's a 45. And everybody goes, oh. And it's even worse unfortunately, with blood, with knives, because, there's defensive wounds. There's, was the body positioned like this? Is the knife going through, ricocheting off of bones? There's all kinds of things that take place. Okay? And so you never know. And so this is an amateur statement. And then he says, notice he describes the victim's injuries in this. The bruises on her face, the marks on her neck, the bloody shirt. Any other signs of postmortem lividity should be photographed and taped without moving the victim. This will show if an offender moved the woman as to manipulate the crime scene. Okay, here's a thought. I'm here to help. Is the victim moving? Because what he's trying to do is gain control. And in this thought process, does she have defensive wounds? i.e., is she fighting back? You see, he's already processing this.
And, just in describing, because let's not forget, this assignment was not describe a person, a victim of a crime. It's a how-to on a crime scene. So
Right.
Is this part of a fantasy? Not to be gross and horrific, but bruises on her face, marks on her neck, bloody shirt. Where's this coming from other than the imagination?
And look here. He goes, does she have defensive wounds? The second little bullet there. Are there hesitation marks on her related to the knife? Or are there multiple stab wounds? Okay. That is very specific. You know who used to do that? Ted Bundy, in part of his fantasies. After he had killed the victims, he had time. And he would experiment post-mortem with the victims and do other crazy, horrendous stuff. And when you think about this kind of statement here for a moment. Okay. When we think about this statement for a second, are there hesitation marks on her related to the knife? You realize what that is torture.
Wow.
Okay.
That's so crazy.
Or are there multiple stab wounds? So what he's doing is giving two scenarios in this one bullet point. So up here, there's something in here going that's transferring itself to the paper, but he sees it in his head. So when he enters 1122 allegedly, these are the kind of things that he's measuring against. And I guarantee you it will be in his computer. It will be in the type of information that he was looking at. And I will submit to you that is also one of the reasons, again, why the defense is so, bent on keeping any Google searches out, anything like that. And that's why they're going after this quickly. And now this next statement is really interesting. These must be photographed and taped. One of the things we don't know yet, okay, we know behavior that he's already exposed. And guess what that is? That's the selfie. This is a message post-homicide at the shower. Now, what does it mean? I have no idea. But why did he do it? Is the bigger question. And did he take pictures at the crime scene? I don't know. It won't surprise me. Okay. I mean, what's the significance of matching Ted Bundy with a thumbs up? It's all good. We're good. Ted Bundy leaving the courtroom. We're good, folks. Don't worry about it. Okay. And so you think about these simple correlational behaviors. And look at it. Is the mark on her neck related to the hanger near her?
Yeah, that's interesting. So he introduces a hanger in this scenario, in this paper, as something to mark, watch, collect at the crime scene. But yuck, that's pretty gross.
Well, yeah, I mean, it's a knife and there's marks on her neck. Remember, he's making this up in his head to present it to the professor. So is he seeing this somewhere? Is he reading books somewhere? What's going on here? I mean, who would think about, hey, there's a hanger next to her. Okay, who would introduce, to your point, a hanger? Unless, what kind of weapon is that? Is it utilized for beating somebody, for strangling somebody? I mean, I've seen hangers used. They weren't very successful, and they had to use their hands. And then he qualifies it. Most of these questions are speculative until absolutely confirmed by the forensic medical examiner, who can use specific equation or scientific equations to determine the approximate time of death. Okay, he's all over the place here on this with that one. Okay. The time of death is never entirely accurate. Again, the knife should be photographed under adequate light and a marker should be placed next to the knife to give the best photographic representation of the evidence. Here's a thought. Is it possible he set the sheath down next to her and photographed it? And then maybe he was interrupted? I don't know. Everybody's, there's a lot of questions that say, how did that sheath get there? Well, here he's talking about, laying a marker down next to the knife.
Chris, let me ask you a question. In all the homicides you investigated where there was a stabbing, how many knives were left behind at the crime scene for police?
Enough, but very few when there are multiple victims, because they take that knife as a symbol of the conquering of the event, and or a phallic symbol, depends on what the motivation is.
Like a trophy.
Like a trophy.
And we already have evidence that he bought a second knife on Amazon after the murders, correct?
Yeah, well, we have evidence, and here's the report, that this description, this ASIM number here from Amazon, if you type this number in on an Amazon search, this is basically their identity it's an inventory control number is what it is. That when you type that number in, guess what it comes back to? It comes back to a K-bar USMC knife, and there are two styles, and he searched both of those styles. And the interesting thing about it is he did it before the murder and he did it after the murder. And that's why they're trying to keep Amazon out of this, because that is like damaging information.
And so if prosecution overlays this paper as interesting added information, right? We're not making any conclusions with it, but he is the author of it. There's an obsession with knives.
Yeah.
Am I wrong?
Not only just knives. I mean, look at the type of knife. I mean, this knife, they issue these to Marines to put on their, as bayonets. And, some Marines carry these. Back in the day, they used to have a ring on them that you could attach it to your rifle. And then you would use it as a bayonet. This goes back to World War II. I mean, this is a very significant knife for those who have served in the Marine Corps. And so this isn't just a regular knife. This is a killing device, specifically for killing, right? And it's scary, the fact that, he spent so much time trying to find it, and pre and post incident. I'm still not convinced that as he was crossing over the Snake River headed towards the Albertsons, where they get him on video and they get him on cell tower pings, that he may have panicked and tossed the knife into the Snake River. I don't know that, but you do cross over the river and you will never find that knife if it did end up in the water.
It's a common sense theory. You can't discount it at all. Let's go back to page 5. I want to, something just jumped out at me on page 5 of this.
Sure.
Again, if people are just joining us, let's just explain. Chris, do you want to explain what we're going through right now?
Sure. This is the assignment that Bryan Kohberger turned into his professor as part of his PhD program.
Oh, you mean master's program? Oh,
his master's program. Okay.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of his master's program where he talked about essentially, a crime scene. So what do you want to see on page 5, hon?
So go down midway, scroll down. He talks about upended furniture, okay, at the crime scene. Page 5. Let's see. I think go down a little bit more. The upended. Sorry, let's keep going.
Maybe it's on page 6. Yeah, here it is, page 6.
He repeats it, but that's fine. Yeah, we can go to 6. Now, upended furniture, the only way furniture is upended if there is a struggle and a fight, your people crash into the furniture and furniture gets knocked over. So again, what is going on in the fantasy portion of this as a question, that there would be upended furniture.
Well, these are things that he would prepare for mentally if there's a struggle. Because look at this here, where he goes before the crime scene sketch. Where
On page 6?
No, page 5, in this bullet point here, he says, if there any sign of forced entry into the home, this would be evident by broken glass from windows and pry marks on the doors, windows surrounding the house. Okay. Well, guess what? He didn't have to force entry. He went through the slider. Okay. That's how they're saying the suspect went in and the suspect went out. Okay. So these are thoughts that he's putting on paper. Hey, these are things we need to consider, and that goes towards your thought process about the upended furniture. And he's talking about sketches. You have to be in the right mind to make these sketches, i.e., you have to visualize and see things. Okay? And that's what he's doing here. He's visualizing this. Okay? He's visualizing somebody writing a sketch, doing a sketch. And he's now putting it on paper verbally of what he's seeing in his mind. And he's saying, while you do not need to be an artist, the responsibility of sketching should be taken with accuracy and a goal for a clear portrayal in mind. Meaning, do it right. Don't mess up. Do it right. And that goes towards his, he's specific about what he does. And that's why when you think about it now, why buy, a Dickie, jumpsuit? Why buy a K-bar knife? Why buy a mask? Okay, a similar type of mask. Okay, why take a photograph after the crime scene? Why drive around the house so many times and it appears that you're even stopping and surveilling? Why are you putting in cameras with another person, to kind of maybe testing the water, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? All of this evidence starts to pile up as circumstantial evidence, and eventually you get a cable. You can't break that cable. If I took this pen right now and went like that, I could break this pen. But when I add another pen, okay, now this is becoming stronger and stronger. And that's what circumstantial evidence is. Now I add a third pen, i.e., let's say driving the car around the neighborhood. So I've got the knife, I've got the mask, I've got the car driving around the neighborhood, and now I've got the phone being turned off. Okay. And now I have a whole handful of cable. Okay. I can't break that cable. And that's what circumstantial evidence is. And that's what the jury is going to see. The jury's going to see, Buddy scratching behind me. The jury's going to see a totality of the evidence. Okay. It's just not one thing, two things, three things. It's a lot of things coming at them. And we haven't even heard all of the other stuff. And so, that's all coming. It's coming. And I think we'll start seeing even more of that as these motions start, and I said it a long time ago that Ann Taylor would use these motions to get around the gag order. And at first it was working. But when Judge Hippler came around, he said, you know what? Enough. The public's going to know now. And she got it as far as she could with Judge. And then the moment she said, well, let's change venues, and she argued for that. Now that we're in Boise, in Ada County, this judge is going, so give me a reason why we should have this protected from the public. The public has a right to know at this point. And she hasn't been able to do it. And so now she's picking words, right? The word police. Okay. Well, you can't use the word, psychosis. You can't use this. You can't use that. And how did the state respond to that the other day, Karen? You made a good point about that.
Yeah, the state came back and said, what exactly was that? There's so much in my head right now from all these motions that were filed. The state came back with something equivalent and basically told the court, well, if we can't use this, then defense can't say that we're calling the defendant something. I can't remember exactly what it was, but it was a touche moment. And it really pointed out the ridiculousness of some of these motions that the defense has filed. Chris, let's go back. Let's finish up with this college paper.
Okay.
And just move through it. I want people to, we have to read every single word, but give people an idea of the minutia that he's writing about with the crime scene. And some of this information is just, it's kind of laughable too. I'm on, I think it's
Well,
page
look at this on page
6.
7 for a second.
Okay.
I'm sorry. Do you want to go?
No, it's fine. There's several examples of this, but go ahead.
But look on page 7. The top of, even if there was an item introduced to the crime, to the scene by an offender to throw off investigators, it is not the job of the criminal investigator processing the crime scene to jump to conclusions. That is fascinating. That he introduces an item into this crime scene. Could it have been that sheath, he didn't wipe it down enough and that he intended to introduce it into the crime scene? Is this all along been in front of us? I don't know. But who picks that particular paragraph and said, even if there was an item introduced to the scene by an offender, he has said the offender is introducing an item into the scene. And what's the intent of that from his mind, in the offender's mind? To throw off investigators. So what do they get at 1122? They get a K-bar USMC knife that immediately you think, is this a military person? And guess what? It worked. There were a lot of people on YouTube that said, no, the Green Beret guy or whoever that guy was, he's the real killer who got shot by the cops. Okay. And guess what? It went that way. And there are thousands of people on YouTube that still believe, it's a conspiracy.
I see your point, but could we be giving him too much credit and he really did accidentally drop the sheath?
Both are possible.
Throwing it out there.
Both are possible. I mean, if I was the prosecution, I'd introduce both possibilities and let the jury decide. Because what's factual in nature is there is a K-bar knife sheath at that crime scene. And somehow it was left there. And in his report, though, i.e. in his school report, he's introducing one to a crime scene by the offender. Okay? Have the defense explain that. What did he mean, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, by that? What did he mean? Okay. Is it a possibility? Well, can somebody tell me it's not? Anything is possible. I've seen things where, I've gone to the suspect once we get him in custody and say, hey, I'll give you, well, as you know, Brandon Wilson. Brandon Wilson looked at me, as you remember, Karen, because it freaked me out. And he says to me, he goes, you know who I am. Remember, I talked about that for quite some time. And I said, yeah, I know who you are. And he goes, you know who I am. Okay. And it was like this, dark person had taken over in that room. And those same black eyes that I see here appeared in that individual. And I mean, look at the messaging here. Why is Ted Bundy telling the world everything's good, and then Bryan Kohberger's giving a thumbs up? What's that all about? And we can talk about the injuries, what appear to be injuries on his hands and stuff. I'm sure the cops have, close-ups, but this was right after, allegedly at 10:30 in the morning, based on probably the metadata on this photograph. Okay, but think about what's going on here, and then think about what's going on here in his mind before the murder. Was it just by accident there was a an item left by the offender introduced to the scene? Is that an accident? Well, people are saying, yeah, of course it could be an accident. I will say, yeah, it could be an accident. But here, he's made it as a possibility that the suspect did it on purpose to throw off investigators. Well, that can't be dismissed. So in an interview, I would have asked him this question. Bryan, I'm taking a look here on page 7, this bullet point up here. And as you know, we found a knife sheath underneath Maddie, or at least to the side of Maddie. Just out of curiosity, what were you thinking when you wrote this? And see how he answers. That then will get you potentially, oh, yeah, okay, you figured that piece of the puzzle out. Or, you know what, no, I just dropped it. It was just messed up. I had a guy one time who put a gun in the mouth of a victim, and I leaned over and I put my hand on his knee, and I said, you're not a bad person. You've just done something bad. Tell me what that felt like. And he looked at me right in the eyes. He started to cry, and he goes, it was horrible. Boom. And the rest just came out. It just came out. These individuals sometimes, and look where he goes here next. He goes right into staging in this particular paragraph. He says staging is common. For example, the offender may have taken items from the house. Well, we have an eyewitness who said it looked like he had something coming downstairs.
Yeah, that was really interesting correlation.
And guess what? Here you have a situation where he's staging and taking items out of the house are two different thought processes in the suspectology here. Okay. But he's connected those two together in this sentence here. Okay. Staging is common. For an example, the offender may have taken items from the house to make it look like a burglary turned robbery, which went wrong. Okay. Well, stealing items out of the house is not staging. Okay. That staging is where you're positioning the victims or you're pulling drawers and that kind of things. It's not taking stuff out of the house to make it look like a robbery. Okay. Because when the police get there, they don't know what's been taken. 90% of the time, family members don't know what's been taken. Okay. Unless it's a car. Of course, that's obvious, right? Where they kill the family and then they jump in the family's car like Dennis Rader did with the Otero family where he drove his station wagon away. Okay. But 90% of the time, no, that's not the case. Okay. But here he introduces this concept into the crime scene. And then he goes back to the sketch. He's talking about a CAD. Laser lights take up 20 measure. Okay, great. That's called a FARO, F-A-R-O. I would request a CAD if available. And isn't that interesting that the house is gone? And guess what they used? They use a CAD FARO to make a 3D model. And now they're arguing over the 3D model. Could you see this where the house is about ready to be torn down and he says, well, can't they just use CAD and make a 3D model? Just take that, can you argue that the house needs to go away just in case? And Ann Taylor, what happened when the phone rang? Hey, are you guys okay with stipulating that the house is, we've collected enough, evidence in that house that we're going to tear it down? And she goes, yeah, make it go away quickly. Okay. We're good. And now they're filing motions and arguing, to your point earlier, Karen, about, well, the 3D model, I thought you said it was going to be, blah, 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 to scale, not to scale, et cetera. Can you see Bryan Kohberger behind the scenes going, this is great. This is
yeah.
great.
Yeah, no, it plays right into him. He's sitting back relishing in that aspect of this.
Yeah. And you
As
notice,
disgusting as that is.
and you notice here, he's taken a higher position than the detectives on the scene. Look at here. In order to collect evidence from the interior of the residence, I will assign roles to officers on the scene. No. It's the other way around. If he's a forensics guy, he's working as part of a team with an investigator, a sworn officer in charge. Okay. That's where I told Cheryl, and Cheryl, if you're listening, okay, when I asked Cheryl or Michelle Morgans, I said, would you go swipe the turd in the toilet? And she looks at me, remember? And she goes, what? What? I know, but please do that. And lo and behold, the suspect had, gone to the bathroom, and it was his poop. And we got him. But here, I will assign, again, the word I will assign roles to officers on the scene, briefing them to watch where they are stepping and not act impulsively or without great care. Well,
to your point, this switches from a college paper to his fantasy written out.
Yeah. This switches to wearing gloves at 3:00 in the morning and taking your garbage, okay, to your neighbor's trash. Because, you don't want to act impulsively, but you have to do that with great care. This is how you clean the car multiple times, and so that there's nothing left over. Hasty actions will lead to valuable evidence being trampled and lost. He's got the strip search method. Interior of the crime scene to be searched from one end to the other with more than one officer's or forensics processing unit. The exterior of the property should be searched from one end as well, switching to a grid search if necessary. Walking from one end of the scene, opposite of the scene, blah, blah, blah. I will then turn around and cover ground to the right or the left without stepping in the same spot twice. You see, he's living this in his head of a real crime scene. He's playing this out. Okay. And then he jumps back to a trailer here, though. The rooms of the trailer should be searched in this method. As I move from one end to the other, I will make sure I shine my flashlight ahead of myself to ensure that I do not damage or carry away smaller pieces of physical evidence. You see, that's the transfer theory. He doesn't want to leave anything on his body, person, as he leaves that crime scene. Isn't that what potentially could have happened here? Smaller items of physical evidence include wood chips, hairs. Now, this is interesting because here he crosses over into forensic DNA evidence to just, things like paint chips, glass fragments, small fibers. But notice he inserts hairs in the middle of all of that. Okay. Why didn't he say saliva? Why didn't he say, other type of, like semen, that kind of stuff, right? Forensics. He just lists hairs. So he's thinking about hair. very carefully here. Does that explain a mask on his head? Does that explain why his head is covered? Because here he's thinking about it. He's thinking about that hair as being equal to paint flakes, glass fragments, and wood chips. Those are very small items, and he inserts hair into that small item list. This is like Rex Heuermann, where he has his to-do list in his torture chamber. Remember that was all revealed? Okay. This is maybe significant up here for him that can you imagine how many times he read this before the homicide? If he's the guy, which I mean, the evidence is saying that's the guy. You know, I mean, you'd have to be whatever. Okay, a jury will decide he's innocent till proven guilty. But at the same time, you know, if it walks like a duck, quacks like a duck, and it doesn't fly during the summertime, it's probably a duck. Just saying. So, and look, if new pieces of physical evidence are uncovered, I will take note of it for documentation, photography, and videography. Things as footprints inside, outside should be prepared. Notice there's no footprints or anything like that discovered at the crime scene, allegedly. I don't know. Time and date of evidence discovery. As this is a serious crime, I have chosen that specialized crime scene personnel will assist me. Again, he's in charge. He's got all the answers. What you're thinking? Where are you at, hon? I can tell
Yeah,
you.
I'm thinking it's all about him. It's his fantasy. He can control it. That's what's going on up there.
Yeah, he didn't think about the dog. He didn't think about Murphy. I'm still curious as to how dog hairs are at his apartment. They collected animal hair, remember?
I do.
And they also collect what they believe to be blood. Remember, from his apartment. There's a lot of evidence we don't even know what was processed yet. You know, and it's going to be trace evidence. Go ahead. What were you going to say?
No. Let's continue to read through this. I'm with you.
Okay, so this is really fascinating here. Because now he's gone into the BAU and he's into behavior evidence. Go ahead.
Yeah, and let's read what he has to say about alibis. This one ought to be really interesting.
Well, yeah, and above that, those of you that haven't seen the video on where we had Greg Cooper, Ann Burgess, Dr. Bricado, myself, Dean, Greg ran the VICAP unit in the FBI. That's the Violent Information Criminal Apprehension Program, which he mentions here in the second bullet point. Go back and watch our video. Okay, it's fascinating that Kohberger brings this piece of the puzzle up. What VICAP is it's a program that agencies fill out all these forms. They put this information in, and then the algorithms figure out similarities in relationship to crimes across the country. Okay, across the country. And Greg was the chief. He was the supervisor of the program in the FBI. He's mentioning this program here because the second thing up there, he said, tracing or identifying suspects, establishing suspects' MO. So he's thinking about modus of operandi, and he knows that the VICAP program could flesh some of that information out. Okay. Guess who else knew about that program and where it really got strong across this country? You guessed it. That guy on the right. Thumbs up. Okay. In fact, that's one of the reasons VICAP was put together. Because, you know, remember Ann Burgess was brought in. By the way, she's going to be with us on Sunday. If you want a great show, come back Sunday. We got a whopper for you. Okay. But Ann was brought into the BAU to talk about some of the things that we're talking about here. See, connecting suspects to the crime or eliminating suspects. Stolen contraband.
Well, I like the one above it. It says confirming alibis or exposing lies.
Yeah.
That one's interesting. Isn't his alibi that he was out stargazing that night?
Yeah, that was
And
his.
by the way, the prosecution has the weather report for that night, November 13th, 2022, in that whole area. And let's just say it doesn't look good for the defense.
Yeah, in fact, it's over cloudy, foggy. You know, you can't even see the sky. But of course, you know, you buy all this clothing, you buy a K-bar knife, you order all this stuff from Amazon, or you go to Dick's Sporting Goods, get yourself a mask, you know, etc. You know, of course you need that for stargazing. Everybody needs, you know, a K-bar knife for stargazing. I mean, why not, right? Etc. And then he gives examples of identifying victims. We can assume the woman lives in the residence before confirming it. A dead body may not be initially tied to the residence. Oh, wow. Does that mean Kaylee just happened to be back because she was ready to leave? I don't know. Maybe that's a long shot, maybe. I find it interesting. For an example, checking into the husband or boyfriend and the location of the children based on the crime scene evidence is warranted. Well, that's interesting. Provide a statutory element of the offense, like the crime scene photography, etc. The body will be taken later by CSI with a coroner for custody to wait for analysis by forensic medical examiners trained to perform the autopsy. Okay. Crimes of passions are rooted in, this is going to be really interesting.
This stuck out for me too.
Did it? Tell me what struck you. And
Well,
you guys in the chat, tell us what strikes you.
Well, go ahead and read it first and we'll talk about it.
Crimes of passion are rooted in emotionality and impulsivity. If this is the case, we can likely count on there being latent fingerprints on the doorknob and all over the knife and victim.
Wow. Just saying. From what we know, right? No, what stood out for me is this could be what we have with the Idaho 4 with the college students. What would be the other? We can rule out a lot of other motives, including robbery.
Yeah,
right, Chris?
This isn't is this type of crime, is it impulsive? It's interesting that they're saying that he's on the spectrum. They're arguing that he could be impulsive. Well, that's not a good thing. Okay. Is it emotional? Well, if there's SA involved and there's a tremendous amount of, you know, this kind of stuff.
And then he was the kind of guy that liked to brush up against women.
And
I'll bet you there's a tremendous amount of pornography on his computer.
And that was 2 years ago that I said that. And I'm still convinced they're going to find a ton. Okay. That said, okay, I said it 2 years ago. I still believe it today because of the viciousness of this case. That shows emotionality. Is he rejected by women throughout his life? Is he just not good enough? Is he that weirdo? You know, that you girls know. I mean, Karen, you know that when your radar goes up and you go, you know what, that dude's just like weird. Okay. You have that sixth sense. All women have it, right?
Yes. And we're never wrong. And the creepy guys are always the creepy guys that you just stay far away from.
Yeah. And so, category, is he a creepy guy?
Let's let the jury decide.
I'm going to say he's a creepy guy. I love your answer though better. Okay. But yeah, I mean, he checks all the boxes. How about if you're on a date with a guy and towards the end of the date, he goes, you know what? You have good birthing hips.
Well, he said it because he was getting rejected because the date spent the night in the bathroom throwing up, if you recall.
Right.
So it was a dig. It was a dig at her. And if you hate women, that's a perfect insult to tell a woman.
Yeah. Crazy. I mean, not mentally. I'm just saying, whatever, right? Look here. The knife should, okay, he's got the knife now. The knife should be examined for latent fingerprints.
Wait, let's put it back up on the screen for people to follow along.
Okay, sorry about that. My bad. Thank you. The knife should be examined for latent fingerprints to be logged separately. Same with the coat hanger, doorknobs around the house, upended furniture, cell phone. Oh, look at, he's thinking about cell phones. Go figure. And virtually any physical evidence big enough to grab. Is it by accident that his cell phone is turned off during the homicide? Or a cell phone, which happens to be his, is turned off? Okay. Crimes of passion are rooted in emotionality and impulsivity. If this is the case, we can likely count on there being latent fingerprints of doorknobs all over the knife and the victim. Small items of biological or trace evidence, such as hairs and fibers from clothing, must be collected using metal forceps or tweezers as to avoid damaging this delicate evidence, which may hold significant value in the criminal investigation. It's kind of like the hairs they recovered at his house. Fingerprints, footprints are class evidence to be taken with molds or fingerprinting kits. Fingerprints should be entered into APHIS, which is the national database. And here again, he goes firsthand. He goes first person. I should use a swab where applicable to collect fluids or skin cells which contain DNA.
Now, Chris, drop down 3 more sentences to where it says, I should make sure to swab under her fingernails to see if the DNA of the offender is there. She likely dug into their skin.
Yeah. And they have inconclusive DNA under Maddie's fingernails. Right. Is there evidence of sexual assault or semen present? This evidence should be marked, swabbed, and collected in a glass vial or cellophane bag. He's wrong, but okay, he's thinking about it. Is there evidence of personation? Did the offender take something, or did the offender display an excessive need for control over the victim as demonstrated by a possible sexual assault and murder? Call coming in, America. I mean, this is his brain. This is his mind. Okay. Well, first of all, you have to ask yourself, did the offender display an excessive need for control? Do you need control, Bryan? That's how I would interview him. Tell me what you need control over. Help me understand your life. Teach me about Bryan Kohberger. Control over the victim. Who puts that down in a crime scene paper for a professor?
That's a great question. Again, the theory that this crosses over from manual procedural to fantasy / I don't know, journal, I don't know, murder novel you're writing. It's quite fascinating.
And then
quite telling. Go ahead.
And then he puts the crime together. He says excessive need for control over the victim. And then he creates the reason for the crime, because he says, as demonstrated by a possible sexual assault and murder. In his mind, he's seeing this as a sexual assault and murder. So the secondary questions become, did the suspect need control over this victim? Did the suspect did he display excessive control? That is learned verbiage from visualization. Okay. That comes back to, we're going to find stuff on his computer that's going to blow everybody's mind. Because here, look at the next word. He uses it. These are all observations to be recorded, though not conclusively. He's in the first person here. He's asking the question, is there evidence of personation? Meaning, is this, let's use Emily Pike. She's a piece of trash. Is there evidence that the suspect personalized her? The answer is no. And so here he goes into a sadistical suspect's mind and says, did the offender take something, i.e. a trophy, to remember the event? Or did the offender display an excessive need for control, i.e. what's lacking in the offender that he needs excessive control over this victim? And does this offender then demonstrate that by possibly sexual assault and murder? Does the fantasy escalate? And that's the reason this victim in his mind is dead. I'll guarantee you nobody else in the class wrote something like this. No, I don't know very many, criminal justice majors that would write in this type of detail. I mean, for goodness sakes, I hang out with the people that ran the behavior science unit. We talk about offenders like this. We don't fantasize about stuff like this. We talk about, this is what we've seen as a result of what the offenders have done. This is pre-incident. This is written back in 2020, May of 2020, and he's turning this in as an assignment. Okay. He's turning it as an assignment. During this searching phase. So now he's broken this down into various types of phases. I just think this one here, again, this one is big. Over the victim. Control over the victim. What does he know about control over a victim?
Well, yeah, exactly. I mean, what is this, a how-to?
Well, again, and then we now go into the secondary thought process about his survey. Tell me what it felt like. What did it feel like? Remember, he wrote this before he did the survey. So he's already thinking about what's it like to have control over a victim during a sexual assault and potential murder. Okay.
Chris, an analogy could be like he's drawing a picture and this paper is the outline, and the questions answered on his survey are like the colors filled in for him in his mind.
That's a great point. That is a great point. Look at this. He even gets down to, during the search phase, evidence seal packaging. I am choosing the bag. I am choosing to bag all evidence and not directly mark it for it will be sent to forensics labs. He's first person here. Control again. He's controlling the evidence to the point where the cops see him at 3 o'clock in the morning wearing gloves or whatever the timing was, and he's cleaning his car. He's vacuuming his car. He's doing, putting the trash up. Even his sister and his family are going, hey, do you think the gloves are a little weird at 2 o'clock in the morning? And the one sister who's a psychology major is going, Dad, yeah, do you think he's the guy? Well, we're not going to talk about it right now. Okay. Even that sister, God bless her. She's probably going to be on the testimony list. We like to put her on the witness list. And he's talking about the types of objects, the physical nature of them. Is the evidence as a liquid? It should be kept in an airtight container such as cellophane bag or glass vial and marked. The value of the object and number of like objects, the case number pertaining, okay, he's marking, packaging of the evidence, time of retrieval. The initials of the person who marked the evidence, BK, in this case.
What's that all about?
I don't know. He's just
What is that all about?
He's just processed the murder of a female that was
stabbed to death. In her home.
He just processed it in his head. And then he's putting it all out on the table here. And he's turning this in as an assignment. Well, could this be pre-incident fantasy? I'll guarantee you that's why the defense doesn't want this in. There's no way. Ann Taylor's going to say, hey, Bryan, guess what? We're going to go ahead and stipulate to, your report that you did in May 5th of 2020 and how to process a crime scene. And you turn it, and we're just going to run with that. Are you good with that? No. You kidding me? This may be, the first layer of a GPS coordinates to 1122 King Street. And 4 innocent students asleep in their beds. Well, at least 2 of them for sure. We know that Xana was potentially up on TikTok. We know that Bethany was awake, and we know that Dylan was awake. But we definitely know that Kaylee and Madison were asleep, and they were attacked brutally. They didn't have a chance. And we don't know what Xana was doing other than we know that she got a DoorDash delivery. Was she moving in the house? I don't know. And was Ethan, did he come to her aid? I don't know. We'll find out over time. Okay. But what we do know is this a write-up of a fantasy that hoping one day it will come to pass, within 2 years, that it will come to pass? What's on that computer from 2020 to November 13th, 2022? I want to know that answer. What's in there? What's that gap of time? Because I guarantee you he's working on that fantasy. And that's why, when we talk about, you just don't wake up one day and decide that your best friend is hypothetically Ted Bundy. And 4 hours after a murder, potentially, you're given a thumbs up like Ted Bundy did in the courtroom. All good. This is a fantasy mentoring process, potentially. And look at the life on his face. It's gone. It's pale. We talked about his hands. We talked about the discoloration. Yeah, we don't know what that is. It could be evidence for sure. I mean, especially that one mark on the top of his hand. Could that be consistent with a bruise? Can he argue that it's not? That will be the question for the jury. Can the defense argue that's not a bruise? Great, then show us. Can the defense argue that, hey, by the way, I'm giving you a thumbs up in front of my shower? Is that a messaging? Why is he doing this? What is this all about? What is this all about? And if they connect him with Bundy in any way, shape, or form and show this picture in a court, just throw some toast up in the chat. It's not, DLR, it's not looking right. Chain of custody, evidence. Did she communicate with anyone down here? And this is kind of his bag, right? The computer stuff. Remember, he wanted to go to the Moscow Police Department and teach them how to digitally, forensically find individuals. So he has all the knowledge over the behavior science unit at the FBI. He's got all the cell phone knowledge. He's got all the information on how to get into networks and that kind of stuff, or the Pullman Police Department, whatever department he went to. Remember, he was the teacher. He's always the teacher in these things. Are you seeing a theme here? You notice the knife is the first thing that he enters up here. The knife. That knife is important. Yeah. He puts it primary. First thing. I'm not going to talk about the hanger. Mishappened wire coat hanger. And now he talks about the physical evidence or the forensics evidence. Okay. Her bloody clothing should be examined. But this would interfere that she would have moved items, clothing removed. This is something the forensic science process unit should do. And it's interesting that he's got her dressed, but he has a sexual assault fantasy of a murder in those paragraphs we just read before that. But here, he's saying, no, she's dressed. She's dressed. You see, that's what we would call slippage, right? The fantasy's kind of presenting itself. It's slipping out. It's not like a Freudian thing. It's like, oops. They don't realize it till it's too late. Kind of like the sheath. Oops. Where's that? Where's my sheath? I don't know. Well, let's go buy another one and do the switcheroo.
He bought a second knife, not a second sheath.
Yeah. Yeah. Because he needed it.
Yeah, exactly.
He needed it. Her clothing should be examined. If she had a cell phone or computer nearby, this should be described, logged, and transported to the digital forensic science examination. This is what he does. Did she communicate with anybody? These are questions. You notice this is the part of his thing where he's questioning her behavior. Did she communicate with anyone? Did this communication indicate a conflict? Did her husband or boyfriend contact her? Did anyone else contact her? I don't know. What was the name of the persona that they're saying potentially could have been him?
Papa Rogers.
Yeah, I don't know Papa
Roger.
Right? We don't know. We won't know for sure if that's him until it comes out in court. But these are questions of triggering. These are questions of jealousy. This is an emotional response here. There's a lot of information going on here. Okay. A lot of these inquiries will occur concurrently in the crime scene. Does she have kids? That's kind of an afterthought. The county records office should give us this information. What? Okay. But where are the kids?
Why are you injecting kids into a murder scene of a woman, a 35-year-old woman who was stabbed to death? Why bring children into this at all?
Well, he's transferring it into the husband or boyfriend of the deceased woman should be established, or should be contacted and establish alibi needs to be immediately located and questioned. Neighbors should be questioned. Did they notice anything unusual? Gas station surveillance. Isn't it interesting that everything that caught him, he's put on this form?
I'm sorry. I'm
You know what I
sorry.
mean?
I absolutely have to laugh.
Nearby gas stations. Give us
Wait,
information.
where is that? I'm not seeing it. Show me.
It's
Oh, there it is. Yes.
eyewitness and surveillance
Wow.
footage in the trailer park, i.e., around the crime scene. And you have a video from the car pulling up, backing up, doing a three-way. Now they have 23 various different tower pings. Some of the most latest information coming out that this guy's in the neighborhood, man, and he may have even come back post homicide, to surveil to make sure that the victims had been discovered.
Well, and that's what my thought was when he came back at 9:15 in the morning on November 13th, and it hadn't even been reported to police yet. So it's, again, just a theory, just my opinion, but I think that's why he was coming back. And maybe I don't think he was thinking, I'm going to get back in that house and try to grab that sheath. I thought it was more on the spectator voyeur end of things, of wanting to see the police action, like dropping the bomb and standing back and watching it explode, that
Yeah.
kind of thing.
Yeah. And, eyewitness footage, surveillance footage. I mean, this is all some of the stuff that caught him. Can you imagine putting this in front of a jury and blow it up on an easel and saying, ladies and gentlemen, let us show you the gas station footage of the white Elantra going by. And by the way, let us show you exhibit People's One of, paragraph, whatever it is, page 12, where even Bryan himself wrote about circumstantial evidence, because that's the type of evidence we're going to show you right now. Press play, please. Can you see the DA doing that? And Ann Taylor going, Your Honor, blah, 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 whatever. Okay. I mean, he's caught himself into trying to cover everything, but he wrote, about the things that would catch somebody that did something. And then he talks about, the closing reports, finally adding this into FBI incident-based, okay, yeah, NIBRS, whatever. Will allow the FBI's UCR and all the uniform crime reporting is every nation or every law enforcement agency around the United States has to report their annual report to the UCR, meaning how many rapes did you have, how many murders, how many times have you done those reports, Karen, for back in the day?
Yeah, all day long. I want to bring your attention to one thing mid-page on page 12.
Okay.
I don't know if you hit it yet. You may have already gone through it. So let me see where it is. Okay, where it's the bullet point says VICAP may be utilized if this case happens to be unrelated to a domestic dispute. This may be the work of a serial killer, though it's highly unlikely.
Yeah.
What's your take on just mentioning, hey, this could be the work of a very smart serial killer?
He's an apprentice. He's an apprentice. He's working his way that direction. And I mean, if this is the creepiest photograph I've seen in a very long time. This is almost equal to when Richard Ramirez, was doing, the devil signs and stuff. back in the day, and the public went, whoa, okay. Why did he take this photograph? You know why? Because we will always remember this photograph, and that's the result. That's what
Do you think he
wanted.
took it for himself, or you thought he was going to get caught and it's to creep us out?
If he ever got caught at some point, okay, he has memorialized himself into the minds of the public. That's what he wanted. That's exactly what he wanted. He was behind this facade, behind this mask. There's nothing there. There's nobody home. The lights aren't on. Look how pale he is in this photograph that potentially was, they're saying was taken at about 10:30 in the morning. So, what are we, 5 or 6 hours post homicide? And that's an empty soul right there. I mean, compared to, look at the photographs of him today in court. His color is back, But if we look at this and really look at it, even Ted Bundy in court on the right, given the thumbs up. At least Bundy's got color there.
Yeah, well, Bundy was acting as his own attorney.
Yeah.
So that could have been just a message to the media. Hey, I got this,
Well, and don't be surprised if things aren't going his way, that he doesn't tell Ann Taylor, like Lori Vallow, but she's just another box of Fruit Loops that, you can't even pull those off the shelf. But that said, don't be surprised if we start seeing him in the trial when it comes up. This is going to be a great trial. It's going to be the trial that everybody is going to want to be at. I mean, this is going to be the one, because you're going to see a lot of, a lot of this here. No, you're doing that wrong. You're doing that wrong. You're doing that wrong. I don't know about this. You're doing that wrong. Right now, he's sitting there in a control position, right? He's, he has no expression. They've got him in suits, right? He doesn't have to wear the orange pajama suit,
or the shackles.
Or the shackle. Yeah, exactly. They'll have a waistband on him, electrical waistband on him, just drop him with 50,000 volts that come through. But he'll be sitting there and he's in a control position. And then all of a sudden, they'll start showing stuff like this. Okay. And now for us, we go, holy crap. What happened? For him, he goes, yeah. You see, he's past feeling. There's nothing there. It's empty. It's just a shell. Okay. He can't, look at this, huh? Look at this picture as he's fleeing, and look at this picture and do a comparative analysis. Here he's like, got it. Here he's like, why are you stopping me? What did I do something? And look at the lips. Look at the tension in the lips. Look at those eyes.
And the brow.
And the brow. Look how he's crunched in. Because he's thinking, holy cow. Okay. Tension is coming on to him here. And how does he answer? Yeah, we're going for Thai food. Okay. But you're on the freeway, dude. Going where? And the father jumps in and says, oh, well, yeah, we're going, we're looking for this restaurant. He's got his GPS on his his knee here. And the father kind of takes over And if you watch that video again, Kohberger's looking at his dad like, yeah, that's the ticket. Yeah, that's what we're doing. And it's interesting. They interject the conversation about the murders in Idaho. Talk about irrelevant information. Hey, the reason I've stopped you is you were following too close to the car in front of you. Well, yeah, we're going to Thai food. And the dad, not exactly Thai food. We're coming from Washington State University. Have you heard about the murders up there? Oh, no, that's not why I stopped you. But, what do you got? Okay. And then Kohberger's like, well, I work there, or do one of you work there? And however that conversation went. Okay. Totally off the wall, irrelevant.
Well, and could a psychologist say guilty conscience?
Well, that's what you're seeing here. This isn't, hey, we're going to get Thai food. I mean, this is that if looks, a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, how many words would you put on this picture? Right? What's it saying to us? I don't know. Right? I've seen that look before. I'll guarantee you this is the look that Ethan saw.
Wow.
That's the look that Maddie saw. That's the look that Kaylee saw. That's the look that Santa saw. That's the look that Dylan saw. And he's the helper. Remember? I'm going to help you understand, officer, why you stopped me for, the crosswalk. Well, we don't have crosswalks in Pennsylvania. And she's like, really? Okay. Yeah, and I just fell off a turnip truck. Do you have a driver's license? Okay. And then he lectures her on the law. And here he's going to tell the officer, well, we're going for Thai food. Okay. And you can bet, isn't it interesting that Ann Taylor is bringing up all these issues? Well, tell him this, tell him this, tell him this. And things just kind of keep striking out. Strike 2, strike 3, strike 4, Oh, wait a minute, there's only 3 strikes. Okay, yeah, but you're past strike 3. You keep moving. Okay? And you start seeing stuff like this where now this evidence is starting to come to the surface. Hey, by the way, he did try to order a knife. Oh, wait a minute, he did get a knife. Oh, wait a minute, he did buy a mask from Dick's Sporting Goods. Oh, wait, his phone actually did ping multiple times around the house. Oh, and did I tell you it turned off accidentally because he was stargazing? Okay. Yeah. How much is that bridge in Brooklyn again? I don't know if a jury's going to buy it at all. And look here, this was the one where I talked about extreme network services and looking through Kaylee information. And the reason for that, I think they were trying to see if, in fact, he was able to penetrate the networks in the house at 1122 King Road. And I mentioned this a while back, too. Okay? Because they did a search warrant on it. They brought in a guy who is ultimately Maori, who's ultimately assigned to a Secret Service task force now. But they wanted to see, based on his previous behavior, i.e. putting the cameras in as a favor for the one girl in her house. They wanted to see if this guy had the knowledge on how to get into those networks. Can you imagine him at home? Talk about creepy. Imagine him at home with his big screen TV, which, by the way, was taken by the defense because there would be information on that TV. Why was that one of the first things the defense went and got? I've asked that question from day one. Why did he send his defense team to his house and say, hey, would you guys do me a favor? Yeah, get the TV. Get the smart TV.
Why didn't the prosecution take the smart TV?
I don't think they knew at the time. I'm being honest, right? I
But
don't
they
think
took
they
a
did.
Fire Stick,
Well,
so why
maybe,
wouldn't they take the TV?
well, maybe they downloaded everything into that Fire Stick, or a separate one. They utilized a separate one. We don't know what they did or didn't do. So I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt based on everything else that we've seen so far. But imagine this creep potentially sitting home watching you in your house because he has gone into your network. That's another level evil, potentially. That's another level evil. See right here, this is all the stuff they took. Fire TV stick, etc. This is what the cops took. 9 possible hair strands. And this was from a while ago, remember, Hum?
I do.
So this is when the WSU went over. In January 10th, 2023, Kohberger's defense team showed WSU law enforcement a piece of paper signed by Kohberger granting his attorney permission to enter his apartment to remove the WSU office keys that have been sitting on the TV stand. Defense attorneys also found and took receipt of a cupboard of the bathroom, well as paperwork of the items. The defense removed a flat screen TV, a computer monitor, a small box of miscellaneous papers, and receipts. They took that smart TV and a computer monitor. Okay. Why? Was it for storage for a guy in jail? Was it to give back to the family? Was it to prevent law enforcement from recovering potential damaging evidence? We'll never know. It's gone. And the defense doesn't have to give it back because they can say, hey, that's attorney-client work privilege. Yeah, we took it, but it has nothing to do with the crime. Okay. Nothing to do with the crime. So that's a win for him on that side of the picture. But these 4 will get justice here. These 4 families will get justice. I'm very excited to see that the families are starting to get the information necessary to help them get through to the next level, whatever that's going to be. And it will be difficult. It will be very rough. But I think as they maintain themselves, arm in arm with the prosecution, they're going to see justice and hopefully, God willing, the right things will be done and a jury will come back. Depends on, the information that they see. So any thoughts, Karen, before we go to Hawaii?
Our prayers and thoughts are always with the victims' families of Kaylee Gonzalez, Maddie Mogan, Xana Kernodle, and Ethan Chapin.
Well said. And everybody, we love you guys. Thank you so much. Please share this information out. It helps us to grow as a channel to help other people and other families. So God bless you all. And God bless the 4 children that are involved. Have a good one. Take care of each other.
Hard working every day, I'm stressed out 24/7, babe. No timeouts, wish we could fly away. You and I go to our favorite place. Oh yeah, make special memories together. I'll be your company now and forever. I say we fly away, you and me, go to our favorite place. Feeling the sun on my face in Hawaii, with you. taking away, yeah, we're taking away. We'll never come down, we're going away.